guest today has spent her life devoted to music, classical music mainly. She is a soprano who studied opera and actually performed as a soprano with opera companies throughout Canada and internationally. About 12 years, I guess, into her career singing opera, she decided to do something, well, some of us may think it was a little crazy, but she certainly didn't. She decided to move home to Newfoundland and Labrador and start a professional opera company here in St. John's. And it's called Opera on the Avalon. By God, she did it. It's my pleasure to welcome to the program the soprano, artistic director, founder, Cheryl Hickman. Hi, Cheryl.
Hey, Karl. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. Let's start with you as a little girl. I'm curious as to how you became interested in music, and especially classical music, as a youngster.
I didn't become interested in classical music as a child. I was interested in all music. So my parents told me that, when I was young, I sang before I spoke. So, and in those days, of course, driving in Newfoundland, we lived in Topsail, and going back and forth to school, the radio was always on. So even to this day, I know some pretty horrendous 70s music that I don't know why I know all the lyrics to, but I do. So I grew up, I think, loving all sorts of music, and in Newfoundland most of the music was, I would say, folk based at that time. So I grew up learning that music, and then got involved with I went to Catholic school, so that was all choirs and the choral tradition, and that's, I think, how I started to learn and to love more, what we would now consider Western based classical music. But so yes, I think I had the ear for it at an early age, and then once I started junior high and high school, I started to take voice lessons, and then realized that my voice probably wasn't best suited to folk music. It was suited to classical. But at the time, I really didn't see my first opera until I had left Newfoundland and was at university. So, because it really wasn't something that was offered here all that much, and it wasn't accessible. So it's now we think, the internet and television, but in those days when I was growing up, there wasn't a lot to be seen locally, for sure.
Now, most people who get into music professionally have somebody in their immediate family, or a relative at least, who was very musical. Mm-hmm. Is that your case?
No.
Wow.
So no, not at all. But I think my parents were smart enough, and we were lucky enough that we were put into music lessons and sports and all of these things, right? So that was a real privilege of my childhood, that I had parents who were forward thinking enough to put us in. I think kids nowadays don't often get all of those activities the way we did when we were growing up. So they put me in music, and I did piano, and that also, I think, was the Kiwanis Music Festival tradition here, that was just what you did. So everyone, it was considered cool if you could play an instrument or guitar or piano or whatever. Everyone did those things. And I think I learned to be a creative person early because of that. So I don't know where it comes from, but I also think most Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are musicians at heart. Like, everyone is musical here, right? People play things, they do things, they sing. It's an oral tradition of storytelling. So I think it was just, in the atmosphere, and that's what it was. But I also think sometimes it's a mystery, the voice, right? Especially for opera singing, you don't pick it, it picks you. And the voice is either there or it is not. So it's not something that you can just practice into existence. You can get better, but unless the voice is there, it's not going to be something that you manufacture.
Right. I'm curious now to know how your mom and dad reacted when you said to them, I think I would like to become an opera singer.
I had incredibly supportive parents who insisted on a very strong work ethic, and they didn't care what I did, but I had to be the best at it. So that's just how we were raised. So that if you were going to do it, I could be a plumber, I could be, whatever, but I had to be the best plumber. So, that was a gift that they gave me. that they wanted me to be happy in whatever I chose to do, but that I think the expectation was be the best at it. So when I said music, they did everything they could to support me, and they did. There were a lot of sacrifices to send me to the places that I wanted to go to. It wasn't inexpensive, and they made those sacrifices, and I'm grateful for them. So, but
that's fabulous. Yeah, you were very lucky.
Very.
So I'm thinking, we have great music educators here, but to sing at the level at which you wanted to sing must have required you going away somewhere to study. Did you?
I did. I left here at 17. My voice teacher was Catherine Harrington, which I know a lot of people will very fondly remember. And she instilled in me as a teenager the love of music. And she was such a huge, I would say, influence in my life to go on and do music. And I didn't feel I could go to Memorial because I loved her so much that I felt it would be disloyal, right? That's just how you are as a younger person. So I went to the University of Toronto, and then I did my undergraduate training there, and then opera school, and then went to the Juilliard School for my master's training, and I did a program there called the Juilliard Opera Center, which is the professional division of Juilliard. And it was the experience of a lifetime. It was really exciting, exhilarating, terrifying, because you felt like you were tested every day. But being in a city where you see the best of the best all the time forces you to raise your level, and also gives you a realistic view of where you sit in the world, right? So when I was, a young person from St. John's, Newfoundland, I thought, how will I ever be able to, perform with these people? And of course, people from here are amazing, right? We are a creative, talented population, and there's Newfoundlanders and Labradorians everywhere. And I found that to be so in New York City too.
Yeah. But what an experience to be in, the greatest city in the world, in my opinion.
Me too.
And to be exposed to all of what you must have been exposed to there. I mean, you must have met people and seen people perform who became kind of idols to you in a sense. And I guess in New York you would have been able to see lots of live opera.
Well, we got not only opera, everything. I think the job of a professional musician and an artist is to see everything. I think if you just see, opera, you're really missing out. So I tried to soak up as much as I could, and the great thing about Juilliard is people give you tickets. So if patrons and donors to the ballet or the opera or musical theater shows, they would give, if they couldn't go to see their seats, and sometimes organizations, they would send them to Juilliard. So we would go every day and see what tickets had come in, and then you'd go. But I remember my first week at school, and I moved in and I was going to school, and Robin Williams came down the hall, because of course he was a Juilliard alumni.
That's right, he was.
And that was common, that you would see, things like that. Christopher Reeve spoke at my convocation, that was normal. So it was, you just got used to it, as used to it as you can get, but being surrounded by that level of talent is really inspiring, and being able to see that and access it and just as part of your daily experience was, I would say, life-changing for me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think most people, when they hear the word Juilliard, think music, but it's also a drama school.
It's drama, dance, music. So there was, my roommate was an actor, and and I see her on TV every once in a while, right? That's the type of experience you had. So it is a very small school. At the time I was there, I think it was only 500 students in all. Yeah. And it's a really, really well-rounded education, but I found it to be the most, one of the most amazing experiences of my life, and I think back on it very, very fondly.
So when you're actually learning an opera, an aria, let's say, is there a temptation to kind of do it the way you've heard one of your idols do it, or what's the process that you go through in learning it?
So there is, but I also think opera's it's changing a lot now, but when I was really performing the most, people have their star singers that they like and they want you to sing it like that. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. So, I would never listen to singers before, because then you get it in your head and you sing it like them. And the job of an artist is not to mimic other people, right? I like singers and artists who are individuals, and that to me is the most exciting artist. So if I wanted to just regurgitate what Maria Callas had done, that's not very exciting for anybody, including myself. So my process for learning pieces has always been, I start with the rhythm and the text, and then only after I have that do I then go to the notes, because it all starts really from the text.
What about language? Because when I think of opera, I think Italian, sure. German, all of these foreign languages. How much of a challenge is that for you in terms of, learning, interpreting?
Huge, but at the same time, you are taught as a young singer, and I think this is why classical singers, it takes us so long to start performing as professionals, because the training is so rigorous and intense. So, by the time I finished Juilliard, I was 28, right? It takes that long. So languages, diction, style, repertoire, even learning it, it takes about 6 months to learn any major role. That's how long it takes. It is a very intensive, time-consuming process. So it's you learn languages as you go. I spent some time in Italy. I still spend time in France, and so I'm always trying to improve my languages just for my own sake. But it's languages are a huge part of it. I've done Czech, Russian, German, French, Italian, but most of the work actually that I do now, and we commission our own pieces, it's all English, and translated into French. But it's, I think the old idea of what people have of what opera is and what it is now are very divergent. So it's most of the pieces now that we do certainly are in the language of what we speak here in Newfoundland and Labrador.
You've performed in various places. I imagine you've performed in big houses, smaller venues, what have you. What was that whole experience like?
It's funny because I find it more nerve-wracking, and have found it more nerve-wracking to perform here, probably because my friends and family are here, so it always means a lot more. I always found New York City to be really exhilarating, but I never felt very nervous there, because I thought, it doesn't matter. There's, it's almost so big that you let go of that nervousness. Yep. Singing in a big house, again, is what you're trained for. You're not mic'd, or sometimes they do what's called sympathetic amplification, which is just a ceiling mic. But generally, you have to learn to sing in those houses. That's the terrifying part, because as a young singer, you really don't know. So adjusting to the acoustic and all of those things, depending on the size of the house, can be slightly terrifying. But I really enjoyed it. The bigger house, the better. It's to be on stage singing with an orchestra of 40 is an amazing life experience. And I really I sang the most, I think, at the New York City Opera Theater, and that was really very, very fun. I didn't get nervous there, but yet I get nervous at the Arts and Culture Center. So go figure.
The home crowd. Yeah,
and you don't see people, the smaller the theater sometimes can be more intimidating, because you see people very easily, whereas bigger houses with the lights and the setup and the stage, you could be anywhere. So it never fazed me. The larger the house, the easier it was for me.
So when you're going through rehearsal, who is it that kind of has the primary role in shaping the performances, apart from the performer himself, herself? But you have a director and you have a composer, or
and
not
a conductor.
Or conductor, I should say. Mm-hmm. Maybe
sometimes you have the composer,
but a conductor and a director for sure. Is that a collaborative process when it comes to shaping, or how does that work? In
the best experiences, it is. So again, the tradition of opera has often been that you're working with people who really do not want collaboration, right? When I was first singing, I think it was very, sometimes there were dictatorships, it wasn't collaborative, and that can be problematic. And I think now, as the art form is evolving and people figure out what, like any best practice at work, how do people work best? I always think that people work best in a circle, right? When everybody's ideas and contributions can be given equally. At the end of the day, though, it does, the responsibility rests with the director and the conductor. They're the ones who are really, I think, tailoring the show to what they want it to be and what their artistic vision is. So yes, everyone else contributes to that, but it is the conductor and the director who are most, and also the designers, the costume designer, the lighting designer, projections, all of that. It's got to be one melding of art forms there.
Well, one thing that I've always been curious about, occasionally you will hear about a film director. For example, I think I saw a documentary the other day on the movie director William Friedkin, and he said that at one point he had directed an opera.
We work with Ruth Lawrence. So, Ruth is a film director, and Ruth did our show last year of 3 Decembers, and she just did our show of February. So we really like to have, I think, there's no strict rules anymore of who you can work with. And often when you bring in people from outside your own genre, that's when you get the most exciting and fresh collaborations. Yeah. So I think the rules, as we used to know them, is if you work in one, you work in theater or opera or musical theater, you can't cross those lines. No. Yeah. Those days are gone, and now I think we get our most fun experiences, and certainly we have found it to be the most exciting and beneficial to the work, is to work with people outside of what we call traditional opera.
Well, that certainly makes sense. Now let's talk about Opera on the Avalon. How did that come into your head that this is something you wanted to do, and how did you manage to make it happen?
It was my dear late friend Jennifer Matthews from Corner Brook, and we had the idea together to start it, and it started out as a napkin. We went to lunch at Blue on Water, and she's like, we should do this, and that's what we did. Because there wasn't a lot of classical music here in opera, it was and really, we're the only opera company east of Montreal, professional opera company east of Montreal, so even in the Atlantic region, it didn't exist. And that's how it started. So it's really transitioned. This is our 15th year anniversary this year.
Wow.
And, we have now 3 commissions under our belt. We've just signed a deal for a new musical. We're doing a lot of film and digital work. It's a really exciting time, but it's also, the company's grown and changed a lot from what it first was, because we do now a lot of multidisciplinary work. We work with all sorts of artists. It's not just opera. We work with theater artists, bands, everyone, because to us, the province is operatic in its scale, in its themes, and its stories. So, we always say the land is our stage, and that's what it is.
Now, since Opera on the Avalon has existed, you've done the, classic operas like Tosca, La Boheme, you've even done American Musical Theater, Carousel, I believe, but you've commissioned works as well, like ours, which was about Beaumont Hamel and Shauna Dithit, and now February, your latest endeavor, which I get based on Lisa Moore's wonderful novel, and as a backdrop, the Ocean Ranger disaster. Just talk about those works, because this is really what, to my mind, this is the real significant work that Opera on the Avalon does. How do you come up? How long does it take from the time you come up with an idea until you actually see it visualized on stage?
So, and I would say that goes to the change of the company. So we used to present and produce work of other composers. Bohème, Puccini, Traviata, things like that. We won't be doing that anymore. So, and again, we are only going to be commissioning, producing, touring our own work. And that's a change in again, I think COVID made us look at what we were doing. It gave us time. Often in the arts and cultural industries, you don't have time to breathe because you're always going to the next thing, right? Things are programmed. And it gave us time to take a breath and to say, what do we really want to do and what is the purpose of the company? And it gave me time to think about what my artistic purpose is. And for me, it's to create and commission new work about this place, about who we are, about stories that are important to everyone here, but also themes that resonate with everyone around the world. So that's changed for our organization. No one needs to see us do Bohème. There, lots of people are doing Bohème better than we ever will, but no one is doing stories about this place in opera. So that was a change that we wanted to bring about, so that, you know, going forward now we will be commissioning and presenting and producing our own work only, both digitally and you know, actual productions. It takes about 3 to 4 years for any show. So from the time, you know, February, which we just finished, that was 4 years because we had the COVID year in there, with the COVID 2 years. But generally it's a 3-year cycle. And from, you know, by the time you figure out who you're going to hire to compose it, who the librettist will be, which is the fancy opera word for, you know, who's going to write the script, then you have to do workshops and you have to see if it works, right? So sometimes it doesn't. Or, you know, significant edits, and then you bring singers in, and, you know, so the first bit of it, the first year is really just the librettist working with the composer, and then you start to do acting workshops. So it's a very intensive collaborative process. So yes, it's certainly time consuming, but for us it's where the most interesting work for our organization exists, for sure.
But it also sounds to me, I mean, this is such a specialized thing, opera. To me, it seems like you would have to reach outside of Newfoundland and bring people in to help you produce these things. I mean, composers, librettists you mentioned, and there must be a whole range of singers as well. I don't know whether we have enough singers here.
We don't have enough singers here, not to do the work that we're doing. Some of them, like we have lots of singers from here who are working in our shows, and of course the orchestra's all from here. But singers at the level of which we need them, there's really only, you know, I think there's Dave Pomeroy is living here. You know, there's really no, I would say, professional opera singers who are singing all over the world living here, because most people are, again, we're nomads, right? We go everywhere. It does take a lot, but again, we're challenged the idea of who works on those shows. So, you know, Lisa Moore, who wrote February, the novel, she's the co-librettist of the show. So she had never done that before. When Robert Schaaf did the libretto for Hours about Thomas Nangle from the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, he had never done that before either. So, you know, sometimes, well, why can't you? Like, we try to get rid of the rules of how people have existed in the past. Well, you shouldn't do that. I think, well, why shouldn't you? So now I will say that we generally, if we have somebody new to the process, we put them with a composer who is very used to the process, so that we don't want to have two quote newbies together. So, you know, Robert worked with a wonderful composer named John Estacio, who had done multiple operas. So, and that was a very collaborative and easy process. And we found the same to be with February as well. I think Laura and Lisa, Laura Kaminsky is the composer of February, and they're fast friends. So I think sometimes the most difficult work is finding the right teams to go together, because what you do not want to have are people who are just not good fits. And sometimes you don't know that till you're in the process. But so far, and I'll knock on wood, we've been very lucky with everybody that we've worked with on the new commissions.
Speaking of people who aren't good fits, have you ever had an experience where, you know, you've cast somebody in a role, and after the fact you thought, you know, that person really didn't connect with the audience, really didn't connect with the role, perhaps I should have gone with somebody else?
Sure, but I think sometimes you just don't know. And again, we cast a lot of emerging artists, and you're taking a chance, but I think the chance is the exciting part of it. Sometimes it really, really works, and when it doesn't, you have to help, especially an emerging artist, to figure out why it's not working, right? So that's more the challenge of working with artists to bring the best out in them, and often that's what it is. opera can sometimes be, and has had the reputation, and orchestras for being toxic in how, certain conductors are or directors. So we make sure that we just don't invite those types of personalities into our spaces. And I think when you have artists who are really focused on bringing out the best in the cast that they have, that's what you get. So, but yes, we've had a couple of instances where I thought, I really don't want to work with that person again, and then you don't, right? So it's, it can be challenging, but artistic people are artistic people.
How has the St. John's audience been responding to Opera on the Avalon over the past many years of its existence now? I mean, because you've had to educate people, I guess, to a certain extent about opera.
We have, but I also think that it's funny because we did Tosca a few years ago, which is one of the, I would say, it's a big moneymaker for a lot of companies that do it. It didn't make a lot of money for us, and we sold maybe half of the house, which is funny. And people, when we put up the titles, because we do Sir titles so people can understand, because it was in Italian, they laughed at the wrong places. Because again, it's not their tradition, right? So I think, why are you laughing there? But of course they're laughing there because a lot of the language is archaic, or the themes, so the audiences that we have for our shows, and I think St. John's is a really sophisticated audience for theater, especially, that they like new work and they like to see things of this time. Like Dead Man Walking for us, which was a show, a new opera we did, and 3 Decembers, they sold very, very well. The older, more established rep that works in other markets does not work for us. So again, it's the tradition may not be here, except for a few of the real diehards, but the tradition that is here is theater. And we have a very long established theater community, and I think that community has now come to see the work that we're doing.
Cheryl, thank you. And continued success to you and Opera on the Avalon. And that's it for this edition of Karl Wells Point to Point. Thanks for watching, folks. See you again next time.